This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long. One question of the Catechism, we always want to move forward consistently. A question of the Catechism on the Constitution of the United States, Arthur J. Stansbury, written the year 1828. Question number 273 says this: by a civil suit, I mean one citizen's calling another into court to answer him for some injury committed against him. By a criminal prosecution, I mean a citizen being brought up by a public accuser for some crime committed against society at large and for which he is liable for punishment. Now, we mentioned this yesterday, and in the chat, I noticed somebody said, no, I wasn't taught that. I was taught you had to be a citizen of the United States, and if you weren't, you didn't. The Bill of Rights and the protections that don't apply to you. Well, that's utterly false, and has always been utterly false. As Justice Joseph Story of the Supreme Court says in his commentary on the Constitution, as the cases have played out, it's always been, if the government of the United States is doing something, whether it be within the United States or in another country, the constitutional protections apply. The government of the United States is restrained worldwide by law. Our Constitution of the United States, our common law tradition, that's what our Constitution is. And that restrains the government of the United States wherever in the world it chooses to act, and against whoever it chooses to act, American or otherwise. It could be the wild tribes of Borneo. The government of the United States is not at liberty to violate the fundamental responsibilities, the duties, the rights of any creature of God. That's the law, friends. And I know we haven't always followed it. I mean, George Bush, just absolutely lawless. Oh, we get them down here in Gitmo, get anybody down in Gitmo, we can do anything we want to them. Well, how silly is that? Gitmo is United States property. United States property is part of the United States. I'm being adamant here. The Panama Canal Zone, when we had control of it, that's part of the United States. Every ship, warship, merchant ship, flying the flag of the United States is a chunk. The law says is a chunk of the United States floating in the ocean under the jurisdiction and protection of the United States. And anything that happens there, the government of the United States, our Constitution restrains the government, our government, no matter where. And then add to it, it doesn't even have to be on United States owned soil. If the United States is in another country, the government of the United States restrains it. Now, I remember a fellow that doesn't follow that law. No, we have lawlessness. Listen, you got an Arab, a half Arab in the White House. We had one a while back, sitting in the White House. You'll never convince me that we voted him into office. But he was there, and he pushed through legislation that allowed him to murder anybody he wanted to murder worldwide, and he did, using drones. I don't even want to say his name. I'd give me such a bad taste in the mouth. Oh, I'm the president of the United States. I want the Congress to pass legislation and say I can kill whoever I think is necessary to kill. Well, understand something, friends. If he's got that kind of power, or thinks he's got that kind of power, and he's using it on non-Americans, soon enough, the American government will be using it on Americans, and already has, to crush their political enemies, whatever party is in power. That's the way that works. That's why it's up to us to insist that law be followed, that the government of the United States, our Constitution, restrain the government of the United States. Oh, you grow weary. Not that I'll ever change the basic fundamental evil and depraved black-heartedness of men. I won't. I can't do that. I'm just a mortal. God can do it, but he chooses not to do it with everybody for whatever reason, and that's not my business. I just know things like that should be spoken against and stopped if possible. It sickens. If you're an American, you have an American mindset, you ought to be sickened about what George Bush did and what Obama did down there in Gitmo. That's not funny. God will not allow a country that does those kind of things a pass. No, we'll pay for it. You better start screaming and hollering now. Law governs in America, not men. And our law, the revelation from God, the laws of nature and the laws of nature's God are his government. Well, that had tangentially touched this question. And there are two kinds of jurisdictions. There's non-criminal and criminal jurisdiction. Some people call it civil and criminal. I don't call it civil because there's nothing civil about it. The word civil is a Latin word that has to do with the law of the city. When people say, for example, civil rights. Where'd that come from? Is that in the Constitution someplace? Civil rights? No. Our Constitution and the Bill of Rights lists, it's a limited list, it's not all, but it's the fundamental rights. The fundamental rights. What's a right in Anglo-Saxon speech? It's a duty. A duty. I strive to be driven by duty. And if you're striving to be driven by duty, if you are driven by duty, that means you're being driven by law. Because duty only arises from law. True law. And once you know what God demands, that's true law. That's fundamental. Directly to you, if you're a Christian man or woman, the Spirit of God will impel you to want to find out what it is and get it done. Get her done. I'm in court now. What drives me? Duty. Just duty. The law demands it. I don't really have a choice. I'm going to do what's right. Oh, you'll have people come against you. They'll call you names. They'll, even your friends, the ones that would benefit by what you're doing, they just can't stand. Your neighbors, they can't stand someone who says, no, this ain't right, and I'm going to do what I can to stop it. So be comfortable. Don't expect people to join you. I mean, if you really know, now be careful. Be careful. You better really know you're right. As Colonel Crockett used to say, Colonel Crockett, you heard Davy Crockett, congressman from Tennessee, killed at the Battle of the Alamo. His motto was, be sure you're right, then go ahead. That's his motto. Be sure you're right, then go ahead. That was what governed his life. Read his autobiography. And he sprinkles that throughout his autobiography because that's what was constantly on his mind. If there's anything good about him, and there were bad and good things, but if there's anything good about him, it was that he strove to know his duty. That's right. That, by the way, that's what the word right means. Right has been hijacked and hackneyed into a selfish concept by the useful idiots of the evil empire. It isn't. It doesn't mean, well, I get to do what I want. No, that's not what right means. Right means duty. It's an old Anglo-Dane word that means duty, and that's what arises out of law. Be sure you're right. You see, there's that word. We have lost the meaning of it. Be sure you're right. What if you're sure you're right? In our old English speech, that meant be sure you know your duty. And once you know it, what true law demands of you, the laws of nature, and the laws of nature's God. And friends, there isn't anything outside of that. All true law falls within those two volumes. You don't have to know everything. People go and spend their lives. I knew a fella down in Oklahoma, can't remember, well, it wasn't far, I think it's South Oklahoma City, spent his life studying the IRS code, trying to show people how they didn't have to pay taxes. Did he have an effect? No. Did he go to jail? Well, a lot of people that followed his advice did. Lots. Some of them were my clients and friends. They got caught up in all that foolish minutia. God does not command us to know that kind of tripe. Matter of fact, he said to the Pharisees, you fellows are overcome with minutia. You've got the Talmud and the Mishnah. It's nothing but chicken manure. It's just your interpretation right down to a gnat's behind and the hair on a hound dog, and you frog hair, we used to call it. Right down to that. And you have omitted the weightier matters of the law. You don't have a clue what's going on. Oh, yes. There are just 2 volumes. There never have been more than 2, and there never will be. And if you know those 2 volumes, have a passion to know those 2 volumes, you'll be so far ahead of what the lawyers and judges know, not that you're to be arrogant about it or to be demeaning about it. You just know, and you gain the confidence of knowing what your duty is. And you don't have to worry. You shouldn't worry about what other people think. I mean, other people that really think they're right-headed, they just hate you for it. Often, very often. Just relax, smile. Don't fight with them. Just do your duty. If you know it, be sure you're right. Be sure you're right. And go ahead. You know, when I was a boy, Davy Crockett was a very famous man to us children growing up. And I even had a coonskin cap. And my uncle go coon hunting. He got me, well, he always had a lot of coon hides, and I had a real live, well, the coon was dead, but it was a real live coonskin cap with a tail on the end. You know, I found out later that Davy Crockett had 6 children, three children by his first marriage, and then his wife died. She died at age 27. That really took him for a tailspin, but not long after that, he married another woman who had a couple of children, and then her and him had 3 more, so he had a total of 6 of his own, and I think I've got it right. He had quite a few, a blended family, as we say today. And his youngest daughter, who never left Tennessee, the rest of his family went to Texas. One of them, well, I won't tell that whole story, but went to Texas. But that one girl, his youngest daughter, stayed there. She passed away in the 1890s. And she says the last time she ever saw her father, the last time, he was on a horse. He got on his horse. He was in front of their cabin out there in West Tennessee, the Western Congressional District. Andy Jackson had the first political machine in America, and they annihilated him in the election. So he vowed that he would leave the United States, and he did. And he went to where? Texas. That wasn't part of the United States, as you know. And the last time she saw him, he left in 36, and she was born in 27. So she would have been about 10 years old thereabouts when he left. Little girl, but she says, the memory I have of my father was him turning and waving on horseback as he took off for Texas, and he had a coonskin cap on his head with a tail hanging down the back. Now, that's the only record, I think, the only record we have that he ever wore a coonskin cap was what his youngest daughter said she saw when she was about 10 years old, last time she saw him. But she told that story a lot, and it became a moving story. And of course, then after that, and ever after that, he's pictured with a coonskin cap on his head. Be sure you're right. Be sure you know your duty. Right. Duty. Then go ahead. Civil rights, there's nothing about that. The rights of the Bill of Rights are fundamental rights. There's a difference between what lawyers call civil rights and fundamental rights. Civil rights are rights and permissions. It's a permission given by government, a duty laid upon you by government. What's a fundamental right? That's a duty laid upon you by God himself, laid right on you no intervening mediary, no government in between. You know it's direct from God because you see it in the laws of nature and the laws of nature's God. That's a fundamental right. And our government in America has no jurisdiction to interfere with any right that is a duty that God has put directly on you. Examples: husbandhood, wifehood. It's not something government does. Government didn't give you those offices of wife or husband. Here's another one: motherhood, fatherhood. Those are duties that God directly bestowed on you. They are not civil rights. No, they're fundamental duties. Here's one: how about the duty that God put on you directly to govern your tongue, to choose when to speak, freedom of speech, First Amendment, and when not to speak, when to remain silent, right to remain silent, Fifth Amendment. Who gave you that duty to govern your tongue and speak when you think God's law demands that you say something and not speak otherwise? God gave it to you directly. And all of those rights of the Bill of Rights, the few of them, they're not all of them, there are others. And the Bill of Rights says that. But all of that is direct from God, no intermediary. Somebody says, well, wait a minute. I thought the Bible said Jesus is Christ, is the only mediator between God and man. He is. Not the Virgin Mary. She doesn't get in there anywhere. There's not a saint that gets in there anywhere. If you're praying to saints, no, that didn't go in there. What about a statue I pray to, or some kind of a created thing like a rosary that I attribute some kind of supernatural powers to? No, that doesn't go in there either. There's only one mediator between God and man. Mediator. Medium, they say in the pagan world. Well, that's what Jesus Christ is. But remember, not only is he a son of Adam, he is God Almighty, the second member of the Godhead. So, in that respect, there is a mediator between you and the Godhead, but at the same time, there is not, because he is God himself. The son of the judge himself. There is no mediator. So, whatever Jesus Christ puts on you directly, and he's the one that distributes all authority by agreement of the members of the Godhead. He's the one that distributes all authority, and he has distributed authority, duty to you directly. And no government has authority to interfere. That's your jurisdiction between you and God. Now, what if you step outside of that jurisdiction? What if you step outside of that jurisdiction and claim to have the jurisdiction? Well, then government has authority to step in. For example, did you know that in the Roman Empire in Jesus Christ's day, that every father, the government said, the powers that be said, every father has the power of life and death over his children. Life and death. In other words, and this happened a lot, if a child was born and the father wanted a boy instead of a girl or a girl instead of a boy, he had the government said he could throw the child to the wolves if he wanted. He could leave it out on the street to be picked up. He could leave the child with and just turn it over to anybody that wanted it. He had no responsibility. Well, God never said that. When God gave you authority as a parent, he did not give you authority. No, he did not give you authority. You could kill your child if you didn't want it. So once you in our world, of course, if you step outside of the scope of authority that God has given you, well, you're fair game, and the government will come after you. But friends, understand every authority, jurisdiction you have has a has a limit, just like every man, every mortal, every government on earth has a limit. And it's your job to know what that limit is with the authority God has given you. To know what that limit is. Be sure you're right. Be sure you're right. Then go ahead and defend your position. This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com. www.commonlawyer.com, coming at you from the remote hinterlands of the Wabash River Valley, where the hogs, the frogs, and the dogs keep up a racket all night long. Somebody said in chat last time, how do you spell that? Wabash. And then they gave a few options. Now, I mention this every once in a while. Wabash is a river. It's a river that drains most of the state of Indiana and about a quarter of the state of Illinois. Most of the state of Indiana, not all of it, but most of it, and about a quarter of the state of Illinois. Maybe a little more than a quarter, maybe closer to a third. I don't know how you'd measure that, but when you look at the map, you can get the sense of the drainage. Wabash is a Kickapoo word. Wabasha, that's the way they said it. Wabasha. And there are two rivers that come together in southern Indiana, and they're both about the same size, maybe the Wabash and the White. The Wabash and the White. You see, both of them come from the west and the north. The Wabash comes down, then forms the border between Illinois and Indiana. And then the White flows right through the middle of downtown Indianapolis. That's why the town was built there. And it gets bigger and bigger. And by the time they get down to a place called Mount Carmel, Illinois, they come together. And that's called the Falls of the Wabash because that's where there's a quick fall of the river over rocks there. It doubles the river in size. But the White River means white, of course, for this reason. Because when it gets low, you can see the bottom. And the bottom, in a lot of places, runs over limestone. Limestone. You see, the stone out of which they built the Empire State Building comes from southern Indiana. It's they mine it right out of the ground, and it's big blocks of it. It's a pure, exceedingly pure, flawless limestone. It's called Bedford stone because a lot of the quarries are around a place called Bedford there in Indiana. Bedford stone. And a lot of places the Wabash flows over. You can look when it gets low and it's white. So the settlers call it the White River. Well, the Wabash also flows over places of stone, and you can see it when it gets low. Right now, by the way, it's very low, very low. The Mississippi itself is so low that it's hampering river traffic, barge traffic. It's not, the barges are struggling right now. The river's low. Fortunately, we got enough rain this year that the corn crop and the bean crop are good. That doesn't mean the price is good, but the crop's good. But then it stopped raining, and it's low. But you could see the white bottom of the White River, called White, and you could see the white bottom of the Wabash, Wabash River. Wabash. The Indian tribe, Kickapoo, said Wabasha. What does Wabasha mean? It means the same thing as white. Wabasha is the way they said white. White. And because for the same reason of the White River, you could see the limestone bottom when it got low. I grew up on a tributary to the Wabash. It wasn't very big. We called it the creek, but on all the maps, it's called a river. And it was navigatable certain times of the year. What I mean to say is you could take a canoe or a john boat down it. I've done that on a few occasions. But when it got in the dry season, if there was a dry season, not every year there is, it got pretty low. It always run, but it got low. So we called it a creek. Everybody else called it a river, but it had a funny name. The name of it was the French trappers got there first. So the French trappers named the creeks and the rivers and the landmarks and some of the towns like Terre Haute, Vincennes, those are French words. They named the state of Illinois. Illinois is also an Indian tribe word with a French pronunciation and a French spelling. Nois on the end, but you don't pronounce the S because the French, they use a lot of letters they don't pronounce. I don't know why. That's the French. That's the way they do things. But Illinois, not Illinois, Illinois. Well, I lived on this river, and we had a river there. Well, there was in Edwards County on the Wabash, a creek called the Bon Paw, which means good, bon, good, or fair, paw, step, walking, foot, paw, like a paw of a bear. Good walking, because you could walk down that creek in the dry season and it had sand bottom. Very smooth walking. Well, we lived on one called we called it the Ambro, but it was spelled embarrass. The French would have probably said embarras. They would not have pronounced the S's on the end. You see, there were two of them. And I used to ask the old fellows at home, the old men, why do they call it it looks like spelled like embarrass, but we say Ambra. Why is it embarrass? And they said, well, in the dry season, when it gets low, it's called the Embarrass River because you can see its bottom. That's why it's embarrassed. I said, oh. And of course, a little bitty kid like me, I believed them, that you think they're old grown-ups are telling you the truth, but they're just using you, bedeviling you to have fun, so to speak. Well, that's why the Wabash is called the Wabash, Wabasha. And when I was on the radio in Terre Haute, simulcast on 4 stations at the same time, 2 FM, 2 AM, I did the morning show, and I would always say, coming at you from the heart of the Wabash River Valley, because Terre Haute's always called itself the heart of the Wabash Valley, and we had a good signal, clear channel 800, one of them, it reached clean from the edge of Indianapolis, clean to the edge of St. Louis. It had a good signal and we were kind of in the middle there, the heart of the Wabash Valley. Sometimes we said green up to Greencastle. Well, that was true too. Well, there's criminal and non-criminal jurisdiction in the federal courts. And in both cases, says Stansbury, this is the Catechism, this is the answer. In both cases, the jury decides the case. If the parties agree, that's what they want. Well, they don't have to agree. If one party demands jury trial, you're going to get a jury trial. It doesn't take both. When an officer of the United States is impeached, he says, the accuser is the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is, as it were, a grand jury that impeaches, that indicts the public office holder to be tried before the Senate of the United States. And the jury is the Senate. The jury is the Senate. In other words, the Senate of the United States tries the case, hears evidence, and acts as the jury. When it comes to officers of the general government in Washington, D.C., presidents, Supreme Court justices, etc. Not congressmen. Congressmen, senators, they aren't impeachable. The legislature, the national legislature, has absolute power to throw one of them out if they want to. But they're the ones that decide that for important reasons we'll get to in the Constitution, Lord willing. But in ordinary prosecutions and suits, in the courts, the jury consists of 12 persons residing near the place where the act was committed. In other words, a pre-established district. And if the jury is not taken from that pre-established district, then its due process hasn't been followed. Why? Because The jury is supposed to be of your neighbors that live in the place where you live. That's why. This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com.